Julian Croft's mansion was a fortress of silence and sterile beauty. In the perfectly sculpted garden, flowers bloomed in colors that no one inside the house could truly appreciate. From his lavish office, the billionaire observed the world he had conquered, an empire of technology and finance that bent to his will. However, all his power ended at the door of his son's room. For 7 years, since the day his wife Eleanor passed away while giving birth, his life had been a desperate search for a miracle. The birth of the twins, Liam and Noah, did not bring the expected joy, but the confirmation of a cruel diagnosis: total congenital blindness. Money, which could buy everything, proved useless against the darkness that enveloped his boys. Upstairs, Liam and Noah's world was an echo of their father's sorrow. The room, designed by the best child safety experts, was more of a padded cell than a refuge. Sound and texture toys lay untouched in corners, ignored by the two boys who spent their days rocking their bodies back and forth, a rhythmic movement accompanied by a low, constant cry. Specialized nannies with impeccable resumes and astronomical salaries didn't last. They arrived with promises of innovative stimuli and left months later, defeated by the children's apathy and the doctor's verdict, a word that hung over the house like a curse: impossible. Their darkness was not just physical, but a profound absence of hope. Julian flipped through the medical reports on his mahogany desk, a pile of paper representing $15 million in failures. Consultations in Zurich, experimental surgeries in Boston, the most celebrated names in world ophthalmology, all ended with the same desolate conclusion. He was a giant in the business world, a man accustomed to bending reality to his desires, but inside his own home, he was a powerless father. Financial success had turned bitter, a daily reminder that despite his billions, he could not buy his sons the most basic of senses. The pain of losing his wife was immense, but the pain of seeing his sons alive, yet trapped in a world without light, was a daily, unending torture. The sharp sound of the intercom pulled him from his somber thoughts. His assistant's voice came through, professional and distant, announcing the arrival of a candidate for the cleaning position. Julian sighed, a heavy sound of exhaustion. It was just another cog in the complex machinery of staff that kept the mansion running. At least, he thought with a trace of cynicism, a cleaner wouldn't promise to cure his sons. He stood up, adjusting the expensive suit that felt like a disguise for the broken man inside. He had to maintain appearances to ensure the order of the house didn't crumble along with his soul. The arrival of this woman was, to him, a trivial event, a mere administrative detail in a day filled with despair. As he descended the imposing marble staircase, the boy's crying became clearer, a sound that wounded him physically. In the entrance hall, a young woman stood waiting. Sophia Rossi wore simple but impeccably clean clothes and held a folder with her documents. There was a dignity and a quiet strength in her posture that contrasted with the opulence and sadness of the environment. She didn't seem intimidated by the luxury, nor was she subservient. Her eyes met Julian's, and for an instant, she didn't see the billionaire, but just a suffering father. He, in turn, saw only another employee, someone to polish the floors he walked on, completely unaware that this modest woman carried the key that could unlock his son's prison. The interview was brief and formal, interrupted by the persistent echo of crying from upstairs. Julian repeated the warning he gave to all new employees. Her function was strictly cleaning, and she should not under any circumstances interfere with the children's routine or offer false hope. He hired her out of the need to fill the position, never imagining that he had just admitted into his fortress of despair the only person who would dare to challenge the impossible. Sophia's arrival was not just that of a new cleaner, it was the arrival of an unexpected variable. A silent force about to collide with 7 years of darkness, pain, and definitive diagnoses. The fate of that family was about to be rewritten. a billionaire broken by pain, and two boys who have never seen the light. Sophia's arrival is just the beginning. If you believe that hope can spring from where it's least expected, leave a like, subscribe to unravel this mystery, and send a message of strength to Liam and Noah. They need to feel our support. Sophia Rossi nervously adjusted the strap of her bag as she waited in the mansion's entrance. At 26, her life was a world apart from that oppressive luxury. She grew up on the outskirts, in a small house where love and hardship went hand in hand. Her reality was made of bills to pay, caring for her sick mother, and a resilience forged in the daily battles of the working class. She didn't have diplomas or sophisticated qualifications, but she carried a wisdom not learned in books. Every house she cleaned, every floor she polished, was another step in the fight for a dignified life. That job at the Croft Mansion wasn't just an opportunity, it was a lifeline, the highest salary she had ever been offered. The twins crying, which she heard during the interview, didn't frighten her. It connected her to a deep part of her past. Sophia knew darkness intimately. Her younger brother Marco had been born with a severe visual impairment. While other girls her age worried about parties, Sophia spent her entire adolescence researching and learning. She became a self-taught expert in sensory stimulation, creating games with lights, sounds, and textures to help Marco use what little vision he had. She learned to navigate the world of shadows with him, to celebrate every small perception of light as a great victory. Their room became a laboratory of hope and love. This dedication, however, was cut short by tragedy. At 15, Marco died in a bicycle accident, a sudden and brutal event that left an irreparable void in Sophia's life. All the knowledge she had acquired, all the techniques she had developed with such love, suddenly became painful memories of a potential that would never be fully realized. That day, amidst the pain of grief, she made a silent promise to herself. If life ever put her in the path of another child lost in the darkness, she would use everything she had learned to honor her brother's memory. She would not let that knowledge, born of love, die with him. Sophia's empathy was even deeper. Years later, she experienced the most overwhelming pain a woman can feel. She lost her own son, a baby who lived for only a few weeks. That experience marked her forever, but it also gave her a keen sensitivity to the language of suffering. That's why, when she heard Liam and Noah's cries, she didn't hear a tantrum or a whim, as the other nannies probably did. She recognized the sound of pure sadness, the lament of little souls who had already given up. The sound wasn't a nuisance to her. It was a call, an echo of her own pain that activated all her instincts of protection and care. With this background, the interview with Julian Croft took on another dimension. For him, it was the hiring of a cleaner. For her, it was a sign from fate. When he mentioned total blindness and the impossible diagnosis, something inside her refused to accept it. His warning not to give false hope sounded to her like a challenge. She didn't see two condemned children, but two children whose potential was being neglected. That job, which at first was just about money, became a mission. She felt with an almost frightening certainty that all her losses and all her learning had prepared her for this exact moment, to enter that house. On her first day of work, Sophia didn't arrive with the arrogance of someone who has a solution. She arrived with the humility of someone who first needs to understand the terrain. As she cleaned the vast, silent rooms she observed, she noted the heavy curtains that blocked all natural light, the lack of visual stimuli in the children's room, and the mechanical attitude of the nanny who cared for their bodies but ignored their souls. Cleaning became an act of investigation. With every piece of furniture she moved and every window she cleaned, she saw not just dirt, but the symptoms of an environment that had surrendered to the illness. Before trying to heal the children, she understood she first had to heal the house. Sophia's first day of work was an immersion in the mansion's somber routine. Through a half-open door, she observed the scene on the second floor. Liam and Noah were in their armchairs, rocking back and forth in a silence broken only by low moans. Across the room, the specialized nanny, an older woman named Agnes, scrolled through her phone, completely oblivious to the children. "Stop that noise," she said without looking up, her voice devoid of any affection. Sophia felt a surge of indignation. This wasn't care, it was warehousing. The children weren't receiving therapy or affection. They were being managed like an inconvenient problem. The opportunity Sophia had been waiting for arose around 10 in the morning. Julian left for a meeting, and shortly after, Agnes, visibly bored, went down to the kitchen to make coffee, leaving the 7-year-old twins alone. For Sophia, that was the last straw. It was an unacceptable breach of protocol, but also the opening she needed. She knew she was about to break the most important rule Julian had given her. However, the sound of the boys crying, which resumed as soon as Agnes left, was louder than any order. Her conscience and the memory of her brother prevented her from simply continuing to clean. She had to act. Sophia entered the living room, carrying her spray bottle of cleaning. "Solution!" The boys stopped crying, the subtle change in the air alerting them to a new presence. "Hello, my angels," she said, her voice soft as a song. "I'm Sophia. I came to make your house smell nice and sparkle." Instead of approaching them, she turned to a large window and squeezed the trigger of the spray bottle several times, creating a rhythmic, crisp sound. Psht, psht, psht. The noise, so different from the muffled, melancholy sounds of their daily lives, cut through the monotony. It was unexpected, it was interesting, and for the first time that day, the crying stopped completely. Liam and Noah turned their heads in unison, precisely in the direction of the sound. Their expressions shifted from sadness to intense curiosity. Sophia sprayed again, this time creating a simple musical pattern. A hesitant smile appeared on Liam's face. When she repeated the pattern, Noah let out a small laugh, a short, breathy sound that seemed to echo through the entire room. It was the first genuine laugh Sophia had heard since she arrived. That sound, to her, was more eloquent than any word. It was a sign of life, a spark of joy in a place that seemed to have forgotten what happiness was. That was her signal to continue. For the next 15 minutes, the living room transformed into a stage for sonic exploration. Sophia used the spray bottle as a percussion instrument, creating varied rhythms. She tapped it lightly on the wooden table, the window pane, the armchair's upholstery, showing the boys how the same object could create different sounds. They were fascinated. They began to participate, trying to mimic the sounds and laughing openly with each new discovery. The room, once a sanctuary of sadness, filled with life and a childlike energy that had long been dormant. They were no longer passive victims of their condition. They were active explorers in a new and exciting universe. It was during the game that Sophia noticed something extraordinary, which made her heart race. When she moved silently to the right corner of the room and made a sound, both boys turned their heads in that direction with unerring precision. When she went to the left, they followed her perfectly, locating the origin of the sound in space. This ability, she knew from her own experience, was inconsistent with a diagnosis of total cortical blindness. There was a sensory perception here, a connection between hearing and spatial orientation that indicated something in their brains was working very well. Something was very wrong with the diagnosis they had received. The joyful scene was interrupted by Agnes's harsh voice from the doorway. "What is the meaning of this mess?" she demanded, her face a mixture of shock and fury. Seeing the boys on their feet, smiling and interacting, didn't make her happy. It made her feel threatened. "Your job is to clean the house. Mr. Croft was very clear. You are not permitted to interfere with the children's routine." The accusation was clear. Sophia had crossed a line not by putting the children at risk, but by challenging the status quo of neglect that reigned in that house. Agnes's anger wasn't out of concern, but from having her authority and her passive methods exposed. Sophia apologized formally and returned to her work, but her mind was in a whirlwind. The boys' reaction to the game, their contagious laughter, and above all, their incredible spatial awareness, did not match the story she had been told. And Agnes's defensive hostility only increased her suspicions. A terrible seed of doubt was planted in her heart. Liam and Noah's condition wasn't just a tragedy, it was a mystery. And she began to get the frightening feeling that those children were being deliberately kept in the dark, in a way much more profound and cruel than just the absence of light. That afternoon, Julian Croft came home early, the weight of the business world on his shoulders. He expected to be greeted by the usual oppressive quiet, perhaps the muffled sound of his son's crying. Instead, as he entered the grand foyer, he heard something he hadn't heard in years. The sound of genuine, happy children's laughter. He froze mid-staircase, his body rigid, convinced his exhausted mind was playing tricks on him. The sound was so incongruous with the reality of his home that it seemed to belong to another dimension, a ghostly memory of a life he never had. That sound was the purest form of hope, and that scared him more than the despair itself. He followed the melody of happiness to the playroom on the second floor. Hiding in the doorway, he observed the scene. Liam and Noah were on the floor, their faces lit up with smiles as they participated in a sound game with Sophia. The new cleaner was using simple cleaning tools to create rhythms, and the boys responded with contagious joy. A part of Julian felt immense gratitude, a wave of relief that almost brought him to his knees. But another part, conditioned by 7 years of medical reports and renowned specialists, screamed that this was impossible. Was it just a fleeting moment? A coincidence? He remained there, a ghost in his own house, afraid that his presence might break the spell. The next day, Sophia arrived determined to take the next step. She found the boys in their room, and with the nanny, Agnes, conveniently absent, she approached the heavy velvet curtains that kept the environment in a perpetual twilight. "How about we let a little ray of sunshine in?" "To say good morning?" she asked in a soft voice. The boys immediately tensed up. "We can't," said Liam, his voice trembling, repeating a learned lesson. "The doctor said light hurts the eyes of those who can't see." The sentence, spoken with the innocence of a 7-year-old child, revealed to Sophia the depth of the psychological prison in which they lived. Their fear was not instinctive. It had been taught. "Just a tiny peek, so the sun doesn't get sad outside," Sophia insisted gently. With a careful movement, she opened the curtain just a few inches. A beam of sunlight, thick with dancing dust particles, cut through the darkness. The boys' reaction was instantaneous and unequivocal. Instead of flinching or complaining of pain, both turned their heads directly towards the light, like sunflowers seeking the sun. "It's bright," whispered Noah, confused. "Warmer," added Liam, his forehead wrinkled in concentration. For Sophia, that was the final confirmation, the irrefutable proof. They were not completely blind. The darkness they lived in was not a sentence, it was a lie. Julian, who had decided to work from home that morning, witnessed the entire scene from the bedroom door where he was about to enter. He saw the boy's hesitation, heard the rehearsed excuse about the light that hurts, and then watched, paralyzed, as his sons instinctively turned towards the sunbeam. 7 years of diagnoses, $15 million, the word of dozens of specialists, all turned to dust. In that single moment, the smartest men in the world had built a prison for his sons, and this cleaner, with nothing but courage and intuition, was opening the first window. The revelation was so monumental, it left him breathless, caught between fury and wonder. He waited for Agnes to take the boys for a snack and entered the room, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. "What was that?" he asked Sophia, his voice low and tense. She met his gaze with a calmness that disarmed him. "Mr. Croft, that was the truth. Your sons are not completely blind. They have light perception, maybe even of shapes and shadows. Their potential has been ignored, or worse, suppressed." Her words were not an accusation, but a statement. She wasn't offering a theory or false hope. She was declaring a fact that had just been proven before his very eyes, a fact that rewrote their entire life story. "Prove it," Julian said, his voice choked, a request that was both an order and a plea. He needed to see it. Again, needed to be sure he wasn't going crazy. Sophia nodded. She closed the curtains again and called the boys back. "Let's play Catch the Fireflies," she announced, taking a small flashlight from her bag. In the dark room, she turned on the light and moved it slowly from side to side. "Where is it?" Each time, with stunning precision, Liam and Noah pointed to the spot of light, their laughter echoing as they chased the firefly with their fingers, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding around them. Upon seeing Noah point correctly for the 5th consecutive time, Julian couldn't take it anymore. He backed away and sat on the edge of one of the beds, his body trembling. He buried his face in his hands, and silent sobs began to shake his shoulders. They were not tears of sadness, but of a violent catharsis. They were tears for the pain of 7 years lost in darkness, for the overwhelming anger against the doctors he trusted, and for the staggering hope that now exploded in his chest. Everything he believed to be true had crumbled. Sophia stood by silently, giving him the space to break, knowing that to rebuild, he first had to fall apart. When Julian's sobs finally subsided, the silence that settled in the room was not one of sadness, but of transformative clarity. The dynamic between him and Sophia had changed forever. He was no longer the all-powerful employer, and she was not the submissive cleaner. They were two allies, united by an overwhelming purpose. Julian looked at her, his eyes still red but with a new determination. "What do we do now?" he asked. The question was not a request for a suggestion. It was a transfer of power. He was admitting that, in his world of specialists and millions, the only person with the map out of the darkness was her. In that instant, he handed her the leadership of the most important battle of his life. Sophia responded with the calm and precision of a general. "First, we document everything," she said, her voice firm. "Every reaction, every new progress, we will record it. Second, we need a new evaluation with an independent specialist, someone who has no connection to the previous team." She continued, outlining a plan of action. "And most importantly, we need to create a daily program of stimuli, consistent and focused. We will treat Liam and Noah as the intelligent and capable children they are, not as terminal patients." Her plan was not based on miracles, but on hard work, methodology, and above all, an unwavering belief in the boy's potential. She gave Julian a path to follow. That same evening, Julian took his first action as a commander in the new war. He called Agnes to his office and dismissed her with a generous check, but with a firmness that allowed for no argument. Then he called Sophia. On his desk there was not a notice, but a new contract. He appointed her the twins' special development coordinator, with a salary that would make her financially secure and with full authority over the children's routine and well-being. The act was symbolic and practical. He wasn't just firing a nanny, he was dismantling the old regime of neglect. And by promoting Sophia, he was arming his main soldier for the fight to come. The following week marked a new era in the Croft mansion. The heavy curtains were replaced with blinds that allowed for gradual control of the light. The silence was replaced by music, laughter, and the sound of structured games. Sophia immersed the boys in a universe of stimuli. They explored textures, traced shapes on light tables, and played with colored flashlights in dark rooms. Liam and Noah, finally freed from apathy and fear, responded with a ravenous curiosity. The transformation was visible every day. They walked with more confidence, their smiles were more frequent, and their bodies, once bent by sadness, now moved with the energy of those discovering the world for the first time. The microclimax of this revolution occurred on a sunny morning. Sophia took a powerful flashlight and colored cellophane filters. "Let's see if we can feel the colors," she told the boys. She covered the flashlight with the red filter and pointed the light at their arms. "What do you feel?" "Warm," said Noah without hesitation. She switched to the blue filter. "And now?" "Colder," replied Liam with the same certainty. Julian, watching from a corner of the room, felt his breath catch. His sons were differentiating colors through the subtle perception of the temperature of their wavelengths. It was an impressive breakthrough, a miracle of sensory perception that no expensive exam had ever detected. The silent celebration was interrupted by the arrival of a figure from the past. Dr. Evans, the chief ophthalmologist who had given the final diagnosis 7 years earlier, appeared at the mansion unannounced. A man with grey hair, an impeccable reputation, and a palpable arrogance. He told Julian that a concerned colleague had alerted him to the dangerous methods being used with the twins, and that he had come to intervene before irreparable damage was done. His presence brought back the cold, clinical energy of hospitals, a grim reminder of the years of hopelessness that family had faced under his guidance. The confrontation was immediate. In the office, Dr. Evans listened to Julian's account with disdain. "Mr. Croft, with all due respect, you are being deceived by your domestic staff," he said, the word domestic laden with contempt. "What you are witnessing is wishful thinking, not clinical progress. Giving these children false hope is cruelty. You are risking their psychological well-being based on the games of an unqualified woman." The words were a direct attack, an attempt to use his medical authority to crush the family's new hope and reassert control over the narrative of the boy's illness. At that exact moment, Liam and Noah entered the office, looking for Sophia. Upon seeing Dr. Evans, they both froze, and the joy in their faces gave way to fear. "The mean doctor," whispered Liam, hiding behind Sophia's legs. "He hurts our eyes with the bright light," added Noah, his voice trembling. The instinctive and terrified reaction of the boys was more powerful than any argument. For Julian, it was the final piece of the puzzle. The expert he revered was a source of trauma for his sons. The cleaner, accused of being a danger, was their safe harbor. The truth became undeniable, and the battle lines were finally drawn clearly and definitively. A child's purity can reveal the truths that adults are afraid to admit. Have you ever witnessed a moment like that, where an innocent question changed everything? Subscribe to the channel to see how Julian and Sophia will handle this revelation, and share your story in the comments. We want to know what it was like. The boy's terrified reaction visibly unsettled Dr. Evans, but he quickly regained his mask of authority. "Children's memories are often distorted by traumatic events," he said, his voice sounding professorial and condescending. "What they may interpret as pain was, in fact, the discomfort necessary for complete ophthalmological exams. Their aversion to light is a symptom, not a consequence of my treatment." He skillfully tried to use psychology to invalidate the children's own testimony, turning their genuine fear into further proof of their supposedly fragile condition. It was an attempt to regain control of the narrative by portraying himself as the misunderstood expert. That explanation was the spark that lit Julian's fuse. The patience he had cultivated through 7 years of medical deference ran out. "Distorted!" he exploded, his voice echoing through the office with a contained fury that made Dr. Evans take a step back. My sons spent 7 years of their lives locked in dark rooms crying because you and your team gave us a sentence of perpetual darkness. They are not afraid because of their condition. Doctor, they are afraid of you. You didn't treat them, you frightened them and stole their hope. Julian's outburst wasn't just about the doctor. It was about his own guilt for having believed so blindly, for having been a passive father. Before the argument could escalate, Sophia intervened, but her weapon wasn't anger, but cutting logic. "Dr. Evans," she began, her voice calm but firm. "If the final diagnosis was complete cortical blindness, meaning the brain doesn't process images, what was the purpose of repeatedly subjecting them to exams with strong direct light in their eyes? What data did you expect to collect from a brain that, according to your own conclusion, was incapable of responding?" The question, precise and technical, exposed the fundamental flaw in his reasoning. Either the exams were useless and cruel, or he suspected there was visual perception and chose not to investigate. Caught in his own contradiction, Dr. Evans was speechless. The renowned specialist, confronted by the irrefutable logic of a cleaner, saw his authority evaporate. A flash of panic crossed his eyes before being replaced by a defensive anger. "I will not be interrogated by a layperson," he snarled, hastily grabbing his briefcase. "Mr. Croft, you are making a terrible mistake. When this fantasy falls apart and your sons are even more psychologically damaged, don't say I didn't warn you." He turned and strode out, but his exit was not that of a confident doctor. It was the retreat of a man who had just been exposed. A tense silence filled the room after the doctor's departure. Julian knelt in front of his sons, his face marked by the battle he had just fought. "My boys," he said, his voice choked, "I promise you, no one will ever again tell you what you can or cannot do. No one will hurt you again." Liam, with a wisdom beyond his 7 years, touched his father's cheek. "You don't have to be sad, Daddy. Sophia said we just needed a chance." Julian looked up at Sophia, a gratitude so deep in his eyes that no words were necessary. The war was declared, but for the first time, they were a united army. Sitting in his luxury car a block from the mansion, Dr. Evans felt no remorse, only fury. He picked up his cell phone and made a call. "We have a serious problem," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Croft is listening to the cleaner. He's going to seek other opinions. We need to act, and fast. Activate our contacts at the medical board. File an anonymous complaint against her for practicing without a license. We need to destroy her before she destroys us." The conversation revealed the dark truth. This wasn't about a diagnostic error or wounded professional pride. It was a deliberate conspiracy. Dr. Evans was not trying to protect his reputation. He was actively trying to suppress the truth and sabotage the recovery of 2 blind children. Dr. Evans acted with the speed of a cornered predator. In the days following the confrontation, the Croft mansion became the target of a campaign of intimidation. The original clinic refused to release the boys' complete medical records, citing sudden bureaucratic complications. A letter from one of the most feared law firms in the city arrived, threatening Julian with a lawsuit for placing his sons in the care of an unlicensed practitioner. The hardest blow, however, was the unexpected visit from 2 inspectors from the State Medical Board, who arrived with a warrant to investigate an anonymous complaint of dangerous experimental treatment. Dr. Evans's network of influence was closing in around them. The inspection was tense. The inspectors, a Dr. Miller and a Dr. Chen, were formally polite, but their gazes were skeptical. They interrogated Sophia about her credentials, techniques, and motivations while flipping through the stack of reports signed by Dr. Evans and his team. Julian tried to explain the visible progress of the boys, but his words seemed weak against the weight of the official documentation. Sophia felt the tide turning against them. It was clear they weren't just fighting a doctor, but a powerful system designed to protect its own and crush anyone who dared to challenge it. The turning point came from the most unlikely witnesses, the children themselves. Dr. Miller knelt to speak with the twins. "This lady," he asked, pointing to Sophia, "did she promise you that you could see?" Liam shook his head. "No," he replied with surprising clarity. "Sophia only, and taught us how to use our eyes. Before, all the other doctors just said we couldn't." Noah added, his voice low, "We always saw the lights, but Dr. Evans said it was in our heads and made us stay in the dark." The brutal honesty of the children hung in the air, dismantling the doctor's narrative. The inspectors exchanged a meaningful look. The inspectors, after watching the boys cheerfully demonstrate their ability to follow a light, changed their stance. Before leaving, Dr. Miller offered Julian some unofficial advice. "Mr. Croft," he said quietly, "this situation is highly unusual. The official reports are definitive, but what we see here is compelling. I strongly advise you to get a new, comprehensive evaluation from an indisputable source, like the head of a major university hospital. Document everything." It was a subtle green light, an acknowledgement that they too suspected foul play and were showing them a legal way out of the trap they were in. The advice confirmed what Sophia already knew. They needed an ally whose reputation was a fortress. She thought of her old mentor, Dr. Evelyn Reed, the renowned head of pediatric ophthalmology at the university hospital, a legend in the field. They hadn't spoken in years, but Sophia knew she was their only hope. With a mix of nervousness and determination, she made the call. She explained that she was caring for a case that challenged a diagnosis of cortical blindness and that she needed help. Dr. Reed, her curiosity piqued by the scientific challenge and the urgency in Sophia's voice, agreed to meet her immediately. In Dr. Reed's office, Sophia didn't just use words. She showed the videos she had been meticulously recording on her cell phone. The renowned doctor watched in silence as Liam and Noah located sounds, followed beams of light, and reacted to shadows. Dr. Reed's expression shifted from skepticism to surprise, and finally to a deep indignation. "This is extraordinary," she murmured, replaying a video of distinguishing the red filter from the blue. "This is not the behavior of children with complete cortical blindness. What you've done with them, Sophia, is a work of intuitive brilliance that is rarely seen." When Sophia revealed that the original diagnosis had been led by Dr. Evans, a shadow crossed Dr. Reed's face. "Evans," she said, her voice suddenly cold. "I should have known. We've been hearing rumors about him in the medical community for years. Wealthy families, ambiguous diagnoses that he and turns into sentences of total blindness, expensive and ineffective treatments that drag on for years. He is a predator disguised as a specialist. We've never been able to prove it. He's too well connected." The revelation was devastating. It wasn't a mistake, but a cruel business model built on the despair of vulnerable families. "Bring those boys here," Dr. Reed said, her voice now filled with a righteous fury. "We will do a full evaluation at no cost. We'll use the most advanced imaging technology we have, equipment that didn't even exist when they were born. If there is functional vision, we will find it, measure it, and document it irrefutably." The offer was more than medical help. It was a declaration of war. It's time someone put a stop to this man's activities, and it seems the time has come. Sophia felt a wave of relief and gratitude. They were no longer alone. The country's top specialist had just joined their army. That night, Sophia told Julian everything. The truth was more sordid than he could ever have imagined. His sons had not just been victims of a medical error, but of a deliberate fraud, a scheme to extort money from his pain. Julian's sadness and confusion solidified into a cold, precise anger. The fight was no longer just for his son's recovery, but for justice. He, a man who built his empire on strategy and power, now had a new target. His mission was no longer just to heal, but to destroy the corrupt system that had almost ruined his family. As they were talking, the twins ran into the office, their faces radiant. "Dad, Sophia, we saw it!" shouted Noah. "The bird's shadow on the window. It flew away really fast, but we saw it," added Liam, jumping with joy. That moment of pure happiness, the fruit of Sophia's work, cut through the darkness of the day's revelations. Julian knelt and hugged them tightly, tears streaming down his face. This was what they were fighting for. It was for moments like this, small miracles born of perseverance, that it was worth facing any enemy, no matter how powerful. The path forward was clear. Armed with Dr. Reed's support and driven by a new, unshakable determination, they had a battle plan. First, the evaluation at the university hospital to get the scientific proof they needed. The report from the nation's top specialist would be their main weapon. Then, they would not just defend themselves from Dr. Evans's threats, they would hunt him. Julian would use all his financial and legal resources to expose the scheme, not only to save his sons, but to ensure that no other child suffered the same fate. The battle for Liam and Noah's vision had become a crusade for justice. The appointment with Dr. Reed was the day the truth became a weapon. Using state-of-the-art brain imaging technology and visual field exams, she mapped the twins' abilities. The results were even more astonishing than anyone had dreamed. Liam and Noah possessed approximately 30% of functional vision, an immense potential that had been completely ignored. With the correct stimulation from infancy, they could have led nearly normal visual lives. The detailed, irrefutable report Dr. Reed prepared was not just a medical document, it was proof of a crime, a scientific testament to 7 years of stolen potential and the silver bullet they needed for the war to come. Armed with definitive proof, Julian Croft moved his empire. He hired the country's best legal team and launched a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against Dr. Evans and the clinic. But his strategy went beyond the courts. He gave the full story, including Dr. Reed's report and Sophia's videos, to a renowned investigative journalist. The scandal exploded into a national news story. Emboldened by Julian's public stand, other families, silent victims of the same scheme, began to come forward. Dr. Evans's empire of lies, built on the pain of desperate parents, crumbled under the overwhelming weight of the exposed truth. The victory was complete. Dr. Evans not only had his medical license permanently revoked, but also faced criminal charges. The court awarded a historic settlement to all the affected families. Julian, however, used every cent of his share to create the Eleanor Croft Foundation for Pediatric Vision in honor of his late wife. With Dr. Reed as its president and Sophia on its board, the foundation began offering free second opinions and funding cutting-edge research, ensuring that the darkness that almost consumed his family would never victimize another. Their tragedy was transformed into a beacon of hope for thousands. 6 months later, life in the mansion was unrecognizable. Liam and Noah, immersed in intensive visual therapy, were flourishing. One afternoon, they ran in from the garden, ecstatic. "Dad, Sophia, we saw the colors," shouted Liam. "The bird in the tree, it had a red chest," added Noah, describing a robin with detail that would have been unthinkable before. They now attended a regular school with minimal assistance, reading large print books and painting vibrant pictures. The world, once a dark blur, was now an infinite canvas of shapes and colors that they discovered with ravenous joy each new day. Amidst the revolution in the boys' lives, a quiet, profound love story had solidified. Sophia was no longer an employee. She was the heart of the home. On a warm evening, as they watched the twins, now able to see and chase fireflies in the garden, Julian turned to her. "You taught my sons to "See the world," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "But you also taught me to see what truly matters in life." He took out a small box, revealing an engagement ring. "Sophia Rossi, will you make our family whole?" Her tearful "yes," whispered amidst happy tears, was the final piece in the puzzle of their lives. The climax of their journey was not a lavish wedding, but a simple celebration in the garden. Julian, Sophia, Liam and Noah were planting a new tree together. As the boys patted the soil around the roots, Liam looked up at the sky and said with a wonder that never grew old, "Dad, the sky is really, really blue today." Julian looked at Sophia, their hands intertwined, their hearts at peace. They were no longer a family defined by loss or tragedy. They were defined by the beautiful, simple moments they could now fully share, a living testament that even after the longest night, the dawn can be brighter than ever imagined. This family's journey leaves us with a powerful and unforgettable lesson. True sight comes not just from the eyes, but from the courage of the heart. Hope can be found in the most unexpected places and be brought by the most unassuming people. They showed us that sometimes the person with no formal qualifications is the only one qualified to see the simple truth. The greatest power lies not in wealth or influence, but in the courage to question the impossible, and in the love that gives us the strength to fight for the light, no matter how long. We were told we had to live in the dark, a story of overcoming that shows us we should never give up. What did you admire most about this family's journey? Leave your opinion in the comments, like the video if this story touched your heart, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our new emotional stories. We have a new one waiting for you every day.